been a while since I've turned the camera on and talked into it. There's been a lot going on. In the midst of all these things going on, there's been nothing going on. If that makes any sense. I want to talk about something that I've talked about before. I don't know if it's been on one of my videos or on one of my son's live streams. But it has to do with LARPing, live action role play. It's like we're all acting. And I'm not immune to that. I've done it too. The strange thing about human experience is we are born not a tabula rasa, or rasa, or however you pronounce it. We're not a blank slate. We have genetics, we have epigenetics, we have in utero experiences. We can feel the emotions, the chemical bath that is our mother during our gestation, the whole thing. So we're not coming out a clean slate or a blank slate, but we honestly don't have any experience aside from whatever that might be in utero. We don't know what we are. We don't know how to be. And the biggest portion of our young life is essentially watching other people, learning how to be this human being that we are. They talk about, like with kids, having role models and things like that. But I don't know that the role-playing, emphasis on playing, ever ends. I've had a career in construction. I'm proud, for whatever reason, of the years of toil and the experience and the attributes of skills that I've acquired over time. The functionality that I've possessed and developed and somewhat mastered in my particular line of work. And that's fine. That's whatever. But I don't know that I could easily call myself blue collar, because my dad was career Air Force, and after that he was in middle and then executive management in white collar endeavors. The bulk of my growing up was, the where you are leaning towards the college prep classes, because I was smarter than average, whatever. But at a certain point, I wasn't disciplined academically. I was very slow at it. I was good at math, but I was slow at math. I was, had a fairly decent memory, and if I read the book and did the homework and listened in class, and I was a pretty good test taker, I could remember, what I needed to remember in order to get the answers right. And it didn't make me super smart, because I was given at one point in time, I don't know, I think it was while my mom was still living, she gave me, like all of my old grade cards. She had kept them. And as I examined them, I was surprised to find out that I wasn't near as smart as I thought I was. I don't know if that's a matter of revisionist memory or self-aggrandizement or whatever. I got into high school, well, let's say it this way. In 7th grade, going through puberty, their idea of an accelerated class was to just take the top 30 kids in my grade and put them all in one class, and then teach us faster or more or whatever. How they thought they were going to give us packets and send us out in the hallway to do math on our own, teach ourselves math. I don't know, maybe that's what the smart kids did, but I didn't last out there more than one grading session. They stopped that pretty quick, because I needed to be taught. I was not autodidact, as the fancy word for that is. But got into high school, did Algebra 1. I was one of 2 kids in that Algebra 1 class that were told we could take Algebra 2 and Geometry the next year. We were smart enough. The other kid's name, I think, was Scott. But I decided not to do that because I wanted the bio classes. I was very interested in, the biology, Bio 2, and I knew if I didn't take it the next year, I wasn't going to be able to get, Bio 2 and chemistry and all the things that I wanted to take. So I opted to not continue right from Algebra 1 into Algebra 2. So my junior year, I got into Algebra 2, and it was like a foreign language. I don't know, I guess the smart kids are good at math. I floundered. Usually always got my best grades the first, 9 weeks or whatever it was, the first grading period. And, no. I was slogging and I don't want to say failing miserably, but I got out of that class. Now, oddly enough, that junior year, I also, because I was so into running and pole vaulting, and had this idea that somehow or another I was going to be, this athlete. Plus, my coach was, the freshman gym class teacher, and you could take gym class as a junior and senior. You didn't have to. It was more like an elective. It was a whole twice a week, kind of thing, and it was worth a quarter credit, and obviously not an academic credit. So my junior year, it worked out that I was taking gym class twice a day, 4 times a week, because I was in 2 separate gym classes, and the discipline that I didn't have that it came to academics, I'll say I excelled at it, but it was certainly, the physical discipline was a lot easier for me. And, I was a distance runner, middle distance runner, pole vaulter. I lived for that stuff. And anyways, so yeah, I dropped out that year out of Algebra 2. And what's funny is the next year, my senior year, I signed up for Algebra 2 again because, well, I guess, that's what smart people do, right? I don't know that I lasted a week and a half. I got out of the class really quickly. And I'm sure it was either study hall or gym class again or whatever it was. But I wasn't very academically disciplined, and all the time while this is going on, in the summers or, here and there, my sister's boyfriend, and then later husband, my brother-in-law, would have me out on the job sites doing different things, and he was a drywall hanger at that point in time. And so I'd go out there and hold the dumb end of the tape and hold up the other end of the board, or, whatever, beat a closet to death, whatever it was. And, somehow I didn't take the ACT, the SAT. I'd taken some college prep classes, but you just heard the story about how I ended up in gym class, and I barely graduated high school because I wasn't paying attention to all of that stuff. I guess everybody thought I would. I guess I had to be told, maybe a little slow in the uptake with that, but I graduated with a quarter credit more than the bare minimum. At that time, it was like 18.25 credits, and I had 18.5 to graduate from the high school that I graduated from in 1981. But in a strange set of circumstances, which I may have talked about before, and I won't belabor the point, I ended up in college. At a Baptist college, and I didn't have a Baptist background. I was freshly minted and going to a Pentecostal church. Freshly minted Christian, I should say, going to a Pentecostal church, and ended up at a Baptist college that didn't believe in the whole Pentecostal thing these days. And so that was fun. And if I liked the class, I did well. And if I didn't like the professor, at least one particular professor, I had 2 classes with her that one semester, I'm sorry. If I don't like you as a person, if I think you're coming from the wrong place, I can't learn from you. And I didn't. And I either got incompletes or Fs, and I don't know. I went from honor roll to academic probation from one quarter to the next, because we were still on quarters back then. But it started getting hard, like really hard. And I wasn't real disciplined when it came to, when a class says, oh, well, you got to read these 7 books in this 10 weeks. And we have a 10-page paper, and you're going to have a midterm, and you're going to have a final, and you're going to have pop-up quizzes. And there'll be assignments. And that was one class, and you had 3 or 4 classes, or 5, or whatever it was. I don't remember now. I would leave all of that till the very last second, and I would still listen in class and everything, but then the tests weren't about what you listened to in class. They were about the reading that I hadn't done, because it was every class had 5 to 7 books you had to read. So I really floundered and dropped out. To go in the Marines, and I'm sure I've told that story before too. But it didn't stay there either. Nothing against any veterans that are Marines, but when I looked around that crowd, I already knew I was going home, but when I looked around that crowd, you could see it in their eyes. They all looked brain damaged, like, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean, it looked literally like they all had brain damage. But they certainly all had something to prove to either themselves or someone else. A lot of them had chips on their shoulder that way. And I remember sitting there thinking, looking at all these other faces, all these other guys, there, all of us sitting there in our, whatever those were, fatigues, with their heads shaved, all looking a little bit on the crazy or lost side. And I looked around and I thought, oh my God, if I stay here for 6 years, I'm going to be just like these guys. And that was not the thing that cemented the deal. I mean, I had already determined, since I had shenanigans played on me, that I was getting out. So there was that. But anyways, I come back home and, what do you do? In and out of construction and all the rest of that for a while. Ended up going down to Texas to Last Days Ministries Intensive Christian Training Center. It helped some. My mom and dad were afraid I had joined a cult, and when I came back and I was like making my bed and, you know, cleaning up after myself and being considerate. Some of the other things that I learned while I was down there. My mom told me later, she said she had thought about writing a letter down there to them, thanking them for turning me into a real human being. But I went from there and I thought, okay, well, I need to get back into college or whatever. So I thought, I'll be a missionary somewhere someday, I guess. So I went back to college, this time to a state college, Wright State University, and as a Spanish major. But again, the same kinds of problems surfaced, and that was, I really didn't have a reason to being there. Now, I met my present wife, my first wife, my only wife, the wife I have right now. I met her there at school, which was great. We met and fell in love and ended up getting married. But I ended up working for my brother-in-law full time. Good decisions, bad decisions, it didn't matter. But it was kind of, I don't want to call it by default. I just kind of drifted into the construction. And got into the commercial end of construction. I think it was, for good, about 1987. So, you do the math, that's a long time. 38 years in commercial construction. And, I was a little bit brighter than average, and, I was fairly conscientious, and I did work hard, and I had a lot of physical discipline. So, the hardness of the job, the physicality of the job wasn't necessarily something that was going to be a deterrent. And the fact that I was a little brighter than average, and I was conscientious, and, was not afraid of hard work. I was running work by halfway through 1988, I think right after I got married in May of 88. I was given a 3-story job to run. Really hadn't run anything before that. Well, I did pretty well at it, and did okay on the next one. And then the next job I did was a big addition, the Science Center at Cedarville College. So I was, 10 years after the fact, I was back at Cedarville, this time as foreman for the interior contractor on a really, really large project. And that was also kind of where I saw the writing on the walls. I asked myself the question, do I see myself doing this, and then for the next 10 years or whatever? And it was like I didn't. I had other goals, when I was at college, I decided I wanted to be a writer. Before that, I'd wanted to be a missionary, and different things like that. And I thought, well, eventually I'd like to get back to college and finish, and here it is, 2025, and I basically took the biggest part of last year off. When I say take it off, I just didn't work. I got out here in the shop and just puttered around. So I could try to act like, some kind of tough, blue-collar construction worker guy, but where would that come from? I started my own business in '96, and I tried to always wear my tools, and I didn't all the time, but I did most of the time. And I guess, by default you could call that blue collar, but I was working for myself. I was what they call an independent contractor, not self-employed. I guess that you pay yourself a wage or a salary with self-employment. I was never a corporation. I was first a partnership, and that ended after 10 months, and then I was sole proprietor since then. And I'm still, my renewal date for my liability insurance is coming up the end of this month, and I'm debating on whether or not to renew it. I had wanted to get at least 30 years in, but I don't know to what end now. It's almost like, well, yeah, I'd love to go back to college and graduate. You know, it was really important to my dad that his kids get a college education, and neither one of us graduated. But you know, other than the satisfaction of accomplishing some kind of milestone, what's the point? I'm not served by a college degree, and I don't know that I'm served by, you know, another year of being in business, especially if I'm not working, not making any money. And you know, you can have a lot of plans, and you can have a lot of dreams, a lot of wants, a lot of wishes, and some of them you'll attain, but not all of them. And at least in my case, there's a great deal of many things that I wanted to do and ended up not doing. And the one thing that I did want to do was, like, you know, clear this shop out of it being a warehouse, get electric out to it, and, you know, not necessarily refurbish, but at least, you know, clean it up and get my dad's shopsmith running, and, you know, essentially have a shop, have a wood shop. Because Dad always had a wood shop. Well, not always, I mean, but we built his wood shop. He built it. I helped a little bit. In 1982, I think it was. And that's when he bought the shopsmith. I thought it was 81, but it was 82. But in realizing this, I passed up some opportunities for work, and I spent money. I say money I didn't have, but I spent money that I shouldn't have spent on things that I didn't need. It was primarily outfitting, you know, upgrading the Mark V until it was a Mark V 20, and then deciding to get the headstock, and then, you know, by the time I got that and everything else, then I'm looking at it going, well, why don't I just get you know, the bench, you know, tubes and the legs for the thing, and just essentially part in, part out, whatever, part up, I don't know how you would say it, upgrade to the point of having a Mark 7, and put Dad's old Mark 5 back together. And I did that. And I've been turning bowls, and I've put some videos on the channel, you know, documenting all the things that I was doing wrong, but, you know, turning bowls and you know, turning out results and things like that. But I'm not a woodworker. And when I say I'm not a woodworker, I mean, not like I don't want to pretend like I really know what I'm doing, because I don't. I'm learning. You know, I'm 62 years old, and I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I've got I expanded my woodworking library from like maybe 1 or 2 books up to 70, because that's how I do things. I'm a bit OCD about all that kind of stuff. And, you know, yeah, I'm learning, I'm training, I'm putzing around here in the shop and doing different things. And a lot of the equipment is newer that's out here. Primarily because I decided to kind of step outside the whole commercial interiors, you know, metal studs and drywall, acoustic ceilings and finishing. I kind of expand my repertoire to where I was doing a lot more what would fall under the scope of general contractor type work, you know, where a lot more of varied things, you know, whether it's interior trim, flooring, several different kinds of flooring really kind of surprised me. My knees are not made for flooring, but you know, doing that kind of work and ending up doing a lot of painting, strangely enough, after saying it was too much like work for years. But I wouldn't even classify myself as a general contractor, even though I toyed with the idea of being one and kind of getting into that realm of work. And then I toyed with the idea of being a handyman. And the thing about being a handyman is they keep asking you to change light bulbs or deal with some kind of wiring issue and things like that. And okay. If it's something simple, that's fine, but I'm not an electrician. I'm not a plumber. And yeah, I've installed some furnaces and stuff like that, but I'm not an HVAC guy. Those furnaces, God, I hope I did them right. But I mean, I say that, and then of course, I've been around the stuff my whole life, and but that doesn't make me one of those guys. I'm not a handyman. I'm not a general contractor. Even at this point in time, I mean, yeah, I'm still an independent contractor, an commercial interior contractor, but I'm not working. And it's not just a matter of, oh, well, I haven't worked for a week, so I'm no longer a contractor. I mean, I'm just not working. Spending a lot of time on the couch. Spending a lot of time feeling sorry for myself. With some various reversals that have happened that I've talked about in another video. But all of that said, even though technically I was born in the baby boom generation, like a year before they decided that was the end of it, from what, 46 to 65, or 64, I think. 46 to 64, I think was maybe it's 45, I don't know, was considered the baby boom generation. I'd be LARPing to say I'm a boomer. I'd be LARPing to say I'm blue collar. I'd be LARPing to say I'm white collar. All of it's a LARP. I'm not a tough guy. I could make the argument that I want, like, the world's worst hunter in the limited amount of hunting that I've done here on my property. Got some pretty awful stories, and even though I have killed and processed and eaten a deer from this property, I got indigestion every time I had some of that venison, so I kind of wonder if that wasn't pangs of conscience. I'm not really a hunter. I'll wear the hat. The way my shoulder feels, the way my knee gives me trouble, my diminishing eyesight. It's not like I'm a drywaller anymore. And I've watched my son work at his YouTube channel. And it is work. I mean, even with YouTube, you watch much of it and everybody's LARPing. I don't say everybody, but you know what I mean. It's performance, even me sitting down in front of this camera. How vain is that? A 62-year-old man comes out to his shop that he really shouldn't have spent the time or the money on, filled with tools that he doesn't have mastery of yet. Not even a lot of experience. On a tripod that his dad bought years and years and years ago with a cheap $128 camera that he ordered online from Walmart. It gets this black band that runs down through the image. And I don't know how to do anything about that. But I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome, but I think it goes all the way back to how I started talking and what I started talking about, and that is figuring out what it means to be human. And I think in a lot of ways, I'm not going to go down the whole hologram, everything's a simulation rabbit hole. I'm not doing that. But in a lot of ways, it seems like when you observe people modeling certain behaviors, attitudes, identities, things like that, you catalog those things kind of as these subroutines in your head. And some people take to a particular subroutine, and that's it. That becomes their routine. It's not a subroutine. But there are others who, follow the trends and they follow the fads, and, they hate what it is they're supposed to hate one day and love what it is they're supposed to love the next day. The same thing. It just depends, because they're plugging into what everybody else is modeling, the other subroutines that are out there. And we're all imitating and LARPing. Been watching a lot of things on YouTube, because obviously we don't have TV, obviously, because quite a while ago when things were really tight, I just decided we weren't going to pay for $110 a month for 500 shopping network channels. And anymore, there's so much in the way of advertisement, and really there's always been propaganda. It's not new. But the decided effort to infiltrate every last aspect of any kind of information that you might want to glean from the greater world. I increasingly get the feeling that it's all a psyop. And boy, I made the mistake. Boy, did I make the mistake. I watched a channel called Unbelievable Tales. And I read the description, and everything. And I watched it, and it was about those guys that tried to escape Alcatraz, and it was very believable. I should have read the title of the channel a little more closely, because it seemed almost too believable. And I wondered why, if this was just happened, in May of this year, that they discovered the 3 bodies and the guys didn't make it and they all died in the bay, blah, 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 blah. And they had, what looked like footage, of them recovering these bodies, like there'd been anything left of them for them being in a muck or mud or in a bay for that long. There wasn't any other reports on the thing. That you would think that would have made kind of the more conventional mainstream news. And it wasn't out there. And that, unfortunately, I guess, cued the algorithm to feed me nothing but these AI-generated infotainment, history-skewing pieces, to the point that that's about all that was in my feed there for a while. And it's not that I'd never thought of it before, but it got me really thinking about everything that you see, and everything that you hear out in the public square, which the internet is, is the de facto public square now. It's replaced television, it's replaced newspapers, it's quickly replacing, radio. We watch our movies online now, and Heck, half the time they don't even release them in the theater. Because no one goes. But everything feels like a LARP. It all feels fake. I know I, me, myself am not. But the only one that I have to prove that to is me. But I think about labels that people have put on me. Being a good dad, that's one of them. I remember an awful lot of times when I wasn't a good dad. Lots of them. And I used to think I was a decent husband. I don't even try to pretend to be a good husband anymore. I'm not. But it all depends on, what's your definition of a good father or a good husband or a good man. What your definition of a boomer is, of a blue collar this or a white collar that, or Gen Z, Gen X, whatever it is. We throw all these labels around and people pick them up and they run with them. And quite frankly, I don't think many of us, and I'm not going to pretend like I have it figured out, but I don't think many of us know what it means to be human. We've all just observed and we're modeling the closest approximation to what we think we're supposed to be or do or attitude to have or opinion. And all of us act out our lives like poorly written plays. Some people plug into formulas that work. And then there's people like me who, in not wanting to plug into a formula, essentially plug into that which is our own undoing. Sometimes we do it when we know better. I could ask myself, and I'm sure you're asking, what in the heck point are you trying to make? The world's a pretty screwy place right now. We suffer from way too much information, but we can't get any information because the information that we get, all of it's skewed. We don't know how to think or feel about things, or even what things are worth paying attention to, because the latest thing keeps on being replaced by whatever is the latest thing. There are things that I believe, and I could say I know them for sure, but even that might be something of a LARP, because what do any of us really know for sure? We knew for sure there were weapons of mass destruction. We knew for sure that jet fuel can't melt steel beams. We knew for sure Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman. And we know for sure that there's no way you could survive going through the Van Allen radiation belts. And Stanley Kubrick was a much better movie maker than we gave him credit for. We know for sure that there's no such thing as spooks, spirits, or ghosts. We know for sure that there is. for sure that the zodiac controls our life. We know for sure that people believe that are stupid. That's one thing I think we all agree on, is that everybody else is stupid. I don't know how many of us are actually stupid, but I do know a lot of us are fooled. And I don't know who made the quote, but there's some quote that goes something like, "It is easier to fool someone than it is to convince someone that they have been fooled." So when it comes to being a human being on this life, in this earth, I think we need to exercise a little grace. I've made a point before, and this is one I'll make again. And I make it as somebody who's lived long enough to have quite the closet full of skeletons. That might, just like the shelf in our closet did yesterday. We had a little walk-in closet. And I heard a big noise, and I went everywhere looking for where the big noise came from. Went in there, and the whole shelf had collapsed, and all of the clothes and everything that was on the shelf was laying in a heap on the floor. But yeah, I've got quite the closet full of skeletons. And I don't think people understand what grace is. Grace is not deserved. Grace is unmerited. And I know in our human economy, being useful to each other, in our human relationships, and all the rest of that, merit has a place. You know, if you're good at something, or you're better at something than other people, then, you know, you get compensated for that, hopefully. And supposedly, we live in a meritocracy, although I'm beginning to believe maybe that's not so true. But yeah, when it comes to human endeavors and how this whole system works, I do believe a meritocracy helps. Obviously, the people who come up with the best formulas and amass giant fortunes to themselves, sometimes you got to throttle that, because it can be, what do they call it, not cannibalistic, but they can be predatory in their competition, to where they destroy other people, lesser people. When I say lesser people, I mean people who have less talent, or maybe their formula isn't scale quite as well. But that's what antitrust laws and things like that are about, although we certainly don't seem to give a rip about monopolies these days. But when it comes to, you know, the competition that is the economy, you know, being useful to other people and competing with other people in our quest to earn whatever compensation it is that you earn by being useful to other people, you know, producing a product, providing a service, whatever it is. The thing is when it comes to how we deal with each other on a human level, on a person-to-person level, on a person-to-group or group-to-group level, we lack a lot in the way of grace. I look at all of the world's religions, and all of them are couched in self-righteousness. All of them. And while in a competitive economy, merit matters. In the economy of God, any of us ever really think we're going to achieve nirvana? That we're going to be good enough? That we won't have to come back to this mortal coil? I could say to the Buddhists, Buddha is nothing. And they would have to agree with me, because wasn't that the point of the whole system of thinking? Is you get to the point where you don't have to reincarnate anymore, and then there's no heaven and there's no hell and there's no coming back. You just get to cease to be. And that is the reward of the countless thousands of incarnations. Maybe I have parts of that wrong. Obviously, when it comes to Islam, it's about submission. When it comes to a lot of religions, there's just thousands upon thousands of these tenets that you have to hold. They're very legalistic systems. And I feel like, Paul from the Apostle Paul, Saul and his road to Emmaus, or whatever it was. Maybe it wasn't the road to Emmaus. Whatever it was, when he was blinded, scales fell from his eyes. And he had went from previously persecuting Christians and voting for their death to being one. And I think it was Paul that wrote letters that were preserved as Holy Writ now, who said, "For it is by grace that you are saved, through faith, and this not of yourselves, lest any man should boast. It is the gift of God." Lest any, I'm sure I butchered the quote, but you get the point. That even the faith that it takes to believe in God comes from Him. I know a lot of people, they look at the Beatitudes, and the Beatitudes are wonderful. But they try to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just, the virtues of the Beatitudes. But honestly, in the context of that passage of that gospel that records that, maybe more than one does. I haven't been in the Bible in a while. But Jesus was talking to quite a mixed crew. There were hookers and taxmen and religious leaders that were of cold dead faith, and zealous political leaders that would very much resemble like fundamentalism in America these days. Believed in miracles, believed in angels, heaven and hell, that kind of thing. But there was also the way that people treated each other as human beings, greater and lesser. And the ones who followed the rules and the regs looked down on the ones who didn't have a prayer of being declared righteous. And I think in that context of that particular sermon that Jesus talked about, what did he say? It says, do not murder, but if you... I can't remember the quotes very well right now, but the one is, do not commit adultery, but I say that a man who's looked after a woman lustfully in his heart has as much as committed adultery. But he said something about, do not commit murder, but if you're angry with your brother, or, call someone raka, which meant like a contemptible fool, you were in danger of hellfire. And I think the point that he was trying to make there, and this has been a very meandering talk, but the point that he was making there was, for all of you people who like to think that you're better than, understand that you're not perfect. You're not even close to perfect. Everybody's got a closet full of skeletons. Every last one of you. So then elsewhere it says, that your righteousness is as filthy rags, or I guess, the connotation there is bloody menstrual cloths. Sorry for the nasty image, but your righteousness is as filthy rags. In the sight of the Lord, there's none righteous, no, not one. That kind of thing. So, all of the efforts are self-effort. Being an old man who's full of flaws, has a closet full of skeletons, who doesn't measure up in any way, shape, or form, who doesn't even hardly know what it means to be human. I have to literally hang my hat on the grace of God. The Bible says that you must first believe that He is, and that He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. It says elsewhere that if a man seeks the Lord with his whole heart, he shall surely find Him. A lot of people like to be dismissive of the Godhead. But it was said of Jesus that in Him dwelt all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. God is immaterial. He is not of stuff. A lot of people say, well, God came first. Well, who made God? Well, God's not made. He is immaterial. He is spirit. And so, as the Bible says, in Him we live and move and have our being. And yet, all the fullness of God can dwell in Christ Jesus bodily. It's one of those, paradox? I don't know if that's the right word for it. It's one of those things that God is everywhere, even in the molecules of the stench of the outhouse. I don't think we understand the character of God very well. We accuse Him of a lot of things. And at least in the scriptures that I read, it's made very clear that He dwells with the lowly and the contrite of heart. He opposes the proud. He gives grace to the humble. I think the scriptures tell us that He is high and lifted up and holy and, righteously adored, and that we should worship Him and praise, because we're not bright enough to figure that out. But I think the true heart of God is He's very humble. And I think the manifest Shekinah glory, that white hot glory of God, if God were to express Himself in this material universe in all His fullness, what's it say? That earth and sky flee from His presence, and the heavens are rolled up like a scroll. And yet, when Moses wanted to see him, he hit him in the cleft of the rock, put his hand over, whatever, however you want to treat that, the Christophany, the theophany, or however you want to explain that, for an immaterial God to have a hand. Essentially, Moses was allowed to catch a glimpse. And in the tent of meeting, which was filled with incense, he came out glowing with the Shekinah glory of being close to the manifest presence of the Creator. God doesn't express himself directly most of the time. Most of the time it's through his creation. As the Bible says, for those with eyes to see, there are those that have ears to hear. I don't think there's much more purpose to this life than to catch a glimpse of the holy. It doesn't involve sitting on a mountaintop or having yourself bricked up in a cave, some kind of self-righteous abandonment of self. Probably the most selfish thing that you could do is go try to not have desires on a mountain top because you think somehow you're going to achieve some plane of transcendence that gets you out of this life. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of him in a sunrise. The dappled sunlight that filters down through the leaves. The whisper of the leaves as they shimmer in the wind as a cool breeze blows through on a hot summer day. Sometimes you catch it in the smile of a kid, the smile of a child. Or you witness incredible altruism in other species of creature. Sometimes one to another, sometimes from one species to the next. It's amazing. And I'm not saying that you have to look hard to see it. Sometimes you just see it. You see the grace of God. You believe in His goodness. Why in the world would God create all of this just to capriciously subject us to suffering? I don't think He did. There's a lot of arguments, well, why would God allow suffering at all, all the rest of that. I don't know. I could give you 1,000 reasons. There's been a lot of people who spent a lot more time thinking about it than me. But I do believe that our purpose in existence is to catch a glimpse of the divine. take it. Well, it says in the Holy Writ, for God so loved the world. They will argue, well, why in the world would God require some kind of blood sacrifice? Well, what kind of diet? I'm not going to try to argue with you about all this stuff. All I know is that as far as I can tell, this is the only life I have. Come back as a penguin, whatever. Fine. But as far as I can tell, this is the only existence that I've been granted. And for all of the efforts that I have put into living, I am at that stage in my life where it's, I don't want to call it diminishing returns, but let's just say that age catches up with you. And mortality, casts a larger shadow. This is not the ramblings of an old man who's desperate to say the right words that God will give him a pass and let him play a harp on a cloud. I'm resigned to whatever my fate is. I have lived the life that I've lived, warts and all. And I know if I have any hope, if any of us have any hope, it's going to be because of God's grace, His unmerited favor. We aren't going to earn it. It's going to be because of His character, His mercy, and His actions that complete whatever it is that makes us acceptable to Him. We must first believe that He is, and that He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him.